April 2nd, 2023, on beautiful Gili Trawangan off the coast of Lombok in Indonesia. It is late at night, and the people next door are giggling incoherently, and we can hear them through the wall, muffled. And it's just been raining, and we also got room service delivered to us. So there are a series of half full plates spread across the long table against the wall, which has a nice polished wooden appearance. And it's been a long journey since our last broadcast. And boy, that giggling just keeps disrupting my flow. But I'm glad they're having a good time. I wonder if they're giggling in English or German. What does it sound like to you?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay, cool. All right. So last time we checked off,
Yeah, where did we leave off?
no, we left
So
off.
much has happened in the last.
We left off the night before the Ingrupuk parade of the Oga Oga floats,
Oh, what?
all the monsters. So it was the night before the day of the monsters. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Wait, so we haven't talked about Nyepi yet?
We haven't talked about anything since
Whoa.
then. And that's why I'm pushing us to do a broadcast now, even though there are people giggling next door. And maybe there's a better time to do this, but every day seems like a little too late. So let's just bite the bullet and get it done now. So, okay, we had the Ingrapuk parade with all the monster floats, which was lovely. Do you have any highlights? I have one, which was this dude who we went down the street to go to a restaurant and look at all the floats that were being gathered together at the local football field. And this dude, two seats down from us while we're eating our fried food or whatever it was we were eating. He's got a porn star mustache and aviator sunglasses and slicked back hair and like kind of coppery, shiny skin and like khaki pants, like almost white, and then this even lighter shirt with big lapels with flowers all over them. And I was like, dude, this guy is like a throwback to Las Vegas's heyday.
Oh, he looked like he was right out of a movie. And the thing is, without Keith even pointing him out to me, I think he went to the bathroom. I don't know, with the food or something. I was noticing this guy too. I was like, who the heck is this guy? He's got some major style going on.
I wanted to talk to him immediately, but between me and him, there was this woman kind of sitting by herself who was super chipper with her friend. They were both speaking Russian, and her friend left to go run around taking pictures outside. And so he started talking with her, and he was like, where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And he was from Brazil originally, but he grew up in Germany. So he was flaunting a kind of Brazilian style, but
But he spoke like a German person. Yeah, that's what was so
there
strange.
was a crisp efficiency
There was a
to.
crisp efficiency. Yeah, it was you would and not like a Brazilian at all, but he looked
And
Brazilian.
I wanted to talk to him because he said that he went to the Gili Islands, and I wanted to know more. But in the whole time, he was just drinking beer after beer and smoking cigarettes casually, and not giving a fuck if anyone took
But
offense
he
to
was
that.
kind of proper too. That's what was so funny.
There was a kind of a dandy
Yeah, he looked like a dandy.
air about him, and I wanted to talk to him, but he wandered off. And the rest of the night, the sun went down, and the streets were congested with various floats, people.
Mostly tourists. I
Most,
mean, when
yeah.
the area we were in, it was a ton of tourists here to see the monsters do their thing in the evening. In this
When
parade.
when they took them all down to the main area, which isn't really that big of a crossroads or anything, it was just absolutely packed with people, just standing on top of any
Steps and
ledge.
stairs and ledges, sides of buildings, anywhere they could find a spot.
There was this poor Russian woman who was standing on a ledge behind me, and all the bricks fell out of the wall that she was standing on. And everyone was like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Are you okay? Are you okay? And she's like, ha, ha, yeah, no problem. And she got up and kind of ignored everything and eventually wandered off. But I was very happy that my steps didn't break
Fall
off
apart.
because I was standing on steps. Although they weren't brick, they were like, it was like a cement
It's like makeshift
ledge.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of shouting and like ghoulish witch kind of sound effects. It sounded like the Monster Mash.
Yeah, the thing is, when they bring these monster creatures out, they make them dance. So they'll like shake them around and like make them do this like cool little dance. And when the monsters are doing this dance, there's some guy on this loud speaker, and he'll make all these monster sounds.
He'll narrate.
He'll
everything
narrate it. It was hilarious. I loved it.
in Balinese.
Oh, it was awesome. That was my favorite part. So you're waiting so long for these monsters to come out, and when they dance, like the whole crowd gets riled up.
There was like 30-foot tall bamboo poles with flags on them being waved around constantly. It looked like a political rally. The amount of energy and flags being waved around and the loudspeakers and everything. And this is at night. All the monster floats gathered in the football field while the sun was setting. And then after we had dinner watching everything, we're like, okay, let's go back home. And what did we do? I don't know. Drop off like purses and
Yeah, I think
stuff.
we had to grab some water.
Grab some water, just relax for a half an hour or so. Then we went out to the end of the road where they took all the big floats, and the sun was down, and all these lights, all these loudspeakers, and tons of tourists. And we saw our first gathering of drunk Balinese dudes. And, you know, if you go to any country and you see a cluster of maybe like 6 to 20 men all sitting around, staring at everyone around them and kind of like being loud and like chuckling or grunting, you tend to avoid those people. But that was the first time we saw it in Bali, and I thought it was kind of interesting. They're definitely drunk, but not really that threatening to me. How did you feel?
No, it looked like they had been, a group of guys that were carrying these monsters on their shoulders. Or I don't know. Yeah, I think that's what happened. And they had finished parading their monster out and about, so it was time for the next monster. So then they all went to the convenience store and had some beers and were having a merry old time. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of them. It was like 20 guys.
There was like
hanging out.
maybe a couple of 12-year-old boys
Oh, I
who
don't
were kind
remember.
of like wandering around because one of them was their dad or older brother or
It
something.
could have been something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that was Ingrupuk, the Day of the Monsters. The next day was Nyepi. So, oh boy.
Because remember, the Ogo Ogo monsters, they have this because the whole point of it is that they are clearing the air of evil spirits, basically. I mean, in a nutshell, more or less. So that when the next day, the day of silence comes, there will be no bad energy or evil spirits there to bother the people. So, so the next day was Nyepi.
Next
when?
day-
What happens on Nyepi?
Nyepi. Well, you go to sleep, and oh boy, they started turning out the lights the day of the parade, the night of the parade. And then the next morning, we had to make that faithful decision: do we show up for breakfast or not? And I was like, absolutely not.
Because on Nyepi, people aren't supposed to work.
You're not supposed to work, talk, use electricity, use lights, do anything. And so for tourists, you're allowed to do what you want in your resort complex, but you're not supposed to use the streets, go outside. Those are cut off by the police. All flights are grounded, and the internet is supposedly cut off, but I never checked. And it starts at 5:59 a.m. And so I set my alarm for 5:30 with the intention of taking a shower and brushing my teeth. And I was so exhausted from the night before that I woke up and, geez, what did I do? I think I ate a little bit of peanut butter.
Oh, you had like a peanut butter sandwich. Yeah, you.
No, I didn't eat any bread.
Oh, you didn't?
It's
Okay,
just
sorry
gross.
about
No,
that.
just some raw peanut butter. And I couldn't muster up the strength to use the shower because everything was so slow and arduous. I consumed some peanut butter and I went back to bed and I unplugged everything. The refrigerator and I made sure to turn off the air conditioning immediately, and I just curled up and waited for everything to pass by me, and I passed in and out of sleep, and the temperature got slowly hotter and hotter and hotter with no wind or anything, and I started sweating, and I got hungrier and hungrier and hotter and sweatier, and finally
Yeah, you did like the
I did the
like
whole thing where I
extreme.
didn't eat
You
anything.
didn't eat anything. You turned off all the electrical components. You unplugged them. The phones are off.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite as extreme. I mean, I went along with most of it.
You went
However,
swimming in the middle of the
however,
day.
I did eat, but I didn't go to the restaurant because I didn't want to take the serve. I didn't want the workers to have to work. So I basically, didn't go to the restaurant. And I just ate peanut butter sandwiches in the room, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I decided to treat the day more as a day of not so harsh, more like rest, relaxation, and even a little bit of pleasure, like ritualistically. So I went to the pool and I swam and I just appreciated the flowers and the sky and the clouds and the palm trees. I did some stretching up in the yoga studio.
There were other people too, right?
Yeah, there were. And yeah, I would say most of the tourists there that day were not, adhering to any of the policies, rules, what have you. They were talking, they were on their cell phones, they went to breakfast. It was basically a normal day, other than they didn't leave the hotel compound, basically, because no one was allowed outside. But Keith and I did try. We kept the day of silence. We didn't speak, and
I didn't bathe.
you didn't eat. You didn't bathe,
It sucked.
and you basically did. I don't even think you left the
The
room.
thing is, as I've said before, I'm naturally an insomniac, and yeah, I thought it'd be like paradise. Like I could finally
You
sleep
didn't have
for
aircon.
36, but I was so hot. And normally I could play a podcast of some murmuring voice, even if it was just gibberish or like a scientist saying very dry things in a lecture or
It's like a
something.
coffee shop backdrop.
Yeah, and normally that's what it would take.
To help you fall asleep.
Murmuring voices plus air conditioning and a pillow between my knees, under my head, and maybe something I could hold on to, and no light at all. And that perfect formula
We'll help you sleep.
could probably maybe help me go to sleep. It sounds so lame, and it is, but
Hey,
I'm
everybody's
so
different.
photosensitive that it requires that frequently for me to go to sleep. But I went to bed after the sunrise, after I unplugged everything, slept a few hours. In the middle of the day, I kept rolling around, sweating in misery. And then I busted out Don Quixote and read as much of that as I could. And right when I was getting in a roll, it was just the sun started going down. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, dude, it's 6:30. Please don't do this to me. And I was crawling up to the edge of the window,
To try to read another page
trying to read a few more sentences, another page.
before the light
something.
went away.
And finally, I was like, okay, no, you're stuck in the dark for 5 more hours. I wish that the insomnia thing played out like it does when you're camping, where after 2 hours of the dark, you fall right asleep because there's nothing else to do. Instead, it was just, no, you're hot and inside and in the dark for 5, 6 hours past midnight. And yeah, but eventually I went to sleep and I woke up the next day and
And I fell asleep right away. which was awesome. And honestly, I can't even remember the last time I went to sleep this early. I think I went to bed at 7:30 when the sun went down. So for me, this was a phenomenal experience, kind of like almost, I wouldn't say once in a lifetime, but it was like very unique in my world to actually just go to sleep with the sun going down. And there were no lights, no phones on, none of that. And I had the best sleep. I don't even know how. I slept so many hours. The next day, I woke up so well rested. It was amazing. That was basically my favorite part of Nyepi, was going to sleep with the sun going down. I loved it.
I speak for every insomniac out there.
I know.
Saying, how dare you sleep so easily.
I know. But hey, I was swimming. I was doing laps in the pool.
Thing is, I had my phone turned off, so I couldn't even check what time it was.
Yeah.
I had my wristwatch, which had little glow.
You couldn't read it.
Hour and minute hands. Had that like nasty sky blue glow to them, and I used that to occasionally check what time it was. But I knew that if I checked it too many times, it'd be like torture.
Yeah.
So
you eventually fell asleep, though.
Eventually I did, and I woke up half refreshed, I guess, but not really. Anyway, so right, the next day we took a tour to, let's see, where was it? We went to the Bat Cave. And, well, first the people were asking, they're like, where were you yesterday? And I was
what people?
The wait staff, the breakfast ladies, they were like, where were you? And I was like, well, I was observing Nyepi. I was holed up like a weird little troll in my room, and I wasn't eating anything or bathing or using electricity or checking or talking or the internet or anything. They're like, "Well, you are Balinese." I was like, "Not really. You were integrated into a nice social fabric, and I had no one but my own neurosis to nuzzle up to that whole time." So, all right. So we went on a tour, and it was, let's see, we went to the Bat Temple.
Yeah, so the next day we did a tour, or 2 days later.
It was 2 days later. The next day it was all recovery.
Recovery from
It was recovery, because I was like weirdly...
like more tired.
Weirdly, not more tired, just psychologically like, okay, I didn't read as much as I wanted to, and I want to read more.
Yeah.
And I need to finally eat, because I was starving and ravenous. It was a fast, man, a fast. And so the day after Nyepi, we went to the Goalawa Temple, which was the Bat Temple. Uh-huh. Anything cool about that?
It was pretty, just like all of the other temples.
That's where I got my necklace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they gave us a necklace.
She gave us necklace. She's like, oh, you don't have to give me any money. And I was like, okay, cool. She was like, yeah, just take the Nyepi. It's to thank you for coming and being here. And I was like, okay, cool. And then she tried to show me like trinkets or something. I was like, no, thank you. And she's like, buy one. I was like, no, sorry.
I tried to give the necklace
back. I didn't
take it.
Yeah, I tried to too. And like, I didn't have any spare change either. So I couldn't. Yeah. Anyways, that's where my necklace came from.
The temple had bats, so these were like holy bats, basically, and people would come to this temple
They're
and
the
give
sweetest looking bats I've ever seen in my life.
There were a lot of them, that's
they
for
look
sure.
like gerbils or something.
Yeah, there were a lot of them, but it was a pretty temple. It was small, but it was beautiful. After that, we went to
Ganga.
Oh yeah.
Wait, no, Ujung Water Palace. That's the palace that was made about 100 years ago by a Dutch architect and a Chinese architect for the local king. Remember? That's the one that had the big stairs, and you were getting nice shots after we climbed up the stairs. There were kind of people at the base of the stairs and people at the top of the stairs.
Oh,
That's where I was rolling up my sleeves to give my arms some sun.
Okay.
Stupidly. And I didn't even roll up my sleeves for that long, and my skin is still peeling to this day.
So sensitive, yeah. And then we went
to Ganga, where we walked on, there's little steps in the water, and there's lots of koi, Like you can remember, we walked up to the the pond,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and there were so many people taking Instagram photos that we're just like, no, we're not waiting to get our Instagram photos on the steps in the pond, which is a giant pond, like a big elaborate moat with a several giant fountains that are 100 years old.
It was basically a water palace, right?
Yeah, it was.
And like people
Well,
would.
I mean, the previous one was a palace made by the local royalty, and this one was an actual temple with religious significance. That's the difference between a palace and a temple.
Okay, yeah, this was a
Palace,
palace.
royalty, temple, religion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
But it was really beautiful, and they had like
it
these
was.
bathing pools that you could go into, and then you could see off in the distance. I believe you could look out and see the ocean, right? And I think
Yeah,
so.
there
Yeah.
was. And remember, our tour guide was saying, like, yeah, the day after Nyepi and the next few days are good days in Balinese culture to get married.
Yeah, so we saw a lot of marriage ceremonies like off to the side
Tons.
of the
And
road.
there was a marriage party there. And along the road in various villages when we were driving around. All right, next, Mount Agung with Lempuyang Temple. I'm sure I'm butchering that. Remember, we went up and we drove to the parking lot, and then there were
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those.
This is a really famous temple. This is the one.
This
is
is
like
the Instagram
iconic.
picture that you get when you come to Bali.
Yeah, it looks like two gates, and then people stand in the middle of these gates, and you see this beautiful backdrop behind. Anyhow, it's at the top of this hill, and to get up there, you can choose to walk, or you can pay 10,000.
There's no shoulder on the wall.
Oh, yeah, or you can pay like a small fee, and then these ladies will take you up on their back of their scooter, which we
Multiple
opted for.
toll booths. We had to take the tour guide to the parking lot, and then we had to take the official tour bus for a price. And they let our tour guide in because he's Balinese, and he didn't have to pay anything. And then they took us to the base of that, and then they were like, "Yeah, you can walk up, or you can pay the ladies to give us motorbike rides." So we had
So
to pay.
we had our first
So we had to
scooter rides.
our first scooter rides, and then we had to go pay money again to get in, to be in line to take a picture. And when we got in, they're like, "Yeah, it's 2 hours to get in line."
I think they were on number 200, and we had like number 420. So, I mean, when you get up to the top of this thing, there are a ton of tourists. And with your entrance fee, you get an official picture taken by this little guy hanging out there. So, again, we decided not to wait for the
I
picture.
just don't care.
I didn't really
dude,
want to wait
no.
for 2-3 hours. So we took our own photos,
Yeah,
and we had a good time.
yeah, it was totally cool. And we asked our tour guide, like, when do you go? And he was like, yeah. And a lot of times we try to time it for sunrise, and some people want to go at like a little after midnight.
Oh.
That's what he was
Well, he
saying.
said some people would get there and camp out to try to get first in line.
Yeah, so he gave us the option earlier. He
If we wanted to leave at 5:30 in the morning, and we said no, no, no.
said 5:30 in the morning, and you wait for hours for everyone else to clear out, and then he would take us to our final location, or he would take us to several places, and we can go later in the day. So that's the one that we did. Anyway, that was the final destination.
Yeah, for that trip.
And for that trip, and he dropped us off on the coast in a town called Ahmed. And that was interesting because that was finally where we got out of the whole Bali tourist circuit. It seemed like there was some dirtbags around, like clusters of men.
Well, Ahmed is like a fishing village, so it's smaller, and
Yeah, that.
there's a lot of little fishing boats and a ton of little hotels on the side
Did
along the
not
coast.
get as many $1 million smiles from the men sitting around.
Yeah, they weren't
crouching.
quite as
They're more like
friendly as the
glaring.
Ubud people, but they were still
They were still pretty. Cool.
yeah. They were more like fishermen, like they weren't there to perform in the temples doing dances. They were there to fish.
Yeah. So my two favorite meals of Bali that I've had. And originally I said that Indonesian food, not not
It's
really
good. It's
my
just too much
thing.
rice.
And it's okay, but too much rice. But finally, I had fish rendang, which was mackerel with their Indonesian spices, and I also had pepes ikan. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that too. That's like steamed and banana leaves, a fish dish with Balinese spices. Spices.
That was really good.
God, those two dishes were wonderful at the hotel. But the hotel, wonderful place. And God, I can't stop thinking about the stars. Wonderful. So, after a few days there, we went to Padang Bai, which was a scumbag port town, where it just seemed like there was kind of
Well, like a port town usually is.
yeah, like a bunch of surly men with venereal diseases, that kind of thing. Well, obviously, we don't know that, but like, come on, like a lot of the women disappeared when the sun started going down, and
Yeah, I felt a little more sketchy.
so we were pretty circumspect about that. We stayed one night, and we took the ferry from there early in the morning. The taxi driver, when he dropped us off at the hotel, was like, "All right, don't talk to the hotel guy about buying a ferry." Buying a ferry ticket through him because he's going to rip you off. And we're like, okay. And of course we did anyway because we checked online how much it cost, and he's like charging us $2 extra. A giant ripoff. Yeah. So anyway, that was our time in the scumbag port. We got some food, and there were people smoking and drinking and stuff. And we got on the ferry. And were you sick on the ferry?
No,
You
but
usually are.
well, I easily get car sick and seasick, so I made sure to do a little research before we got on this ferry, and I specifically asked the guy for a specific boat that I wanted to take because I researched it and I found out the name of the bigger or the biggest boat available, which was, I think it was like the Eka Jaya or something.
Yeah.
And so we went on, this would be the biggest fast boat to the island unless we wanted to take the 9 hour long huge ferry. Like that's like the huge one that like puts cars on it and stuff. And we didn't want to do that. So the next biggest one was this one that we took, the Eka Jaya.
I read all these horror stories about, if you look online about the, like, what do you call it, a trip advisor?
Yeah,
like,
TripAdvisor.
like advice about ferries, and some of them say like, this is awful. They keep you penned in for an hour, and people are vomiting on the floor.
there's no
and
bathroom.
there's no bathroom, and it's super choppy, and nothing's on time.
Well, and then I read one horror story about, and you know, I'm sure this happens sometimes that somebody was like, yeah, we were fearing for our lives. There was a storm out at sea, and like they didn't turn around, and the boat was tipping to and fro, and people were screaming, you know. And so I like had this all in my head before we get on the boat.
so awesome.
And of course, like usual, I spend all this time worrying, you know. And then in the end, we have like the most fabulous ride, beautiful weather, sunshine, big puffy clouds, and we're sitting on the top of the ferry. You know, it's just total sunny, shiny, heaven, blue skies kind of day, you know? And they even had some music going. It was great.
It is very, it does seem very unregulated.
Yeah.
Like they were like zipping right past other boats, and like not, there's
Oh,
really
by a huge boat too.
like by huge boats, and there
Like a
weren't
cargo
really people flagging other boats in and making extra sure that nobody crashes or anything. It's more like
Seat of your pants.
kind of no one wearing uniforms, but people just kind of zipping by, and everyone's chain smoking. And
Well, and I did read that in the TripAdvisor review when the person was like, "We were fearing for our lives. We thought we were gonna die." You know, they're basically that person was like, "Yeah, you know, these boat companies will just push it, and unless there's some governmental decree or you know demand that all the boats must come in because there's a big storm, these boat companies will just push it because there's money coming in, there's tourists to be served, even if it's not necessarily the safest to be doing that." So this, I don't know if it's true. It's something I read on TripAdvisor, but you know, somebody. It was somebody's experience.
Yeah, it's maybe life is considered cheap. I don't know,
I don't know.
but sometimes whenever I see like workers with cigarettes dangling out of their mouths, it's something about it just reminds me of the before time. Before everyone got neurotic and online all the time, and it just relaxes me. So I loved all the cigarette smoking
They were a pretty
porters,
chilled,
and
yeah,
yeah,
pretty chill
they
group
were
of
selling
guys.
beers to people. Just they were like these barefoot dudes smoking cigarettes with fabrics wrapped around their necks so they wouldn't get sunburned.
Oh yeah, the tourists had all their like tank tops on and their skin exposed, trying to get sunshine. But all the guys who are riding the ferry, moving the suitcases around, they were completely covered up from head to toe. Their arms were covered, their legs were covered, basically even their hands and heads were covered almost.
So there's three islands. There's Gili Trawangan, and that was the first island, and that's the party island. And so as soon as we approached, they were playing this like party music, dun, 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 like half Rasta, half like Russian techno music. And people were nodding their heads and stuff, and there were a lot of men with man buns
Yeah.
who were like laying on top of various platforms with no shoes and no shirt,
Yeah.
and
Drinking a beer.
drinking a beer and stuff. There's that first guy I saw drinking beer was this Chinese tourist who just sat down right next to me. He's like ordered a beer, and he's this chubby dude just kind of sat down, staring around, and the porters gave him his beer. He gave him the money and just pounded it. He wasn't even trying to show off or anything. He just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beer finished. Okay, and so he just spaced out with a big grin on his face for the rest of the time. I was like, fuck, that should be me. Soon enough, Keith. Soon enough. And so they dropped off half the people at Gili Trawangan, the party island. And then they dropped off the next round of people with the music still playing at Gili. God, what was it? Gili Mano. Gili Mano is like the big.
No, it's a small,
Well,
pristine.
well, I meant big as in the emphasis is on the environment.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say the big environment island. So there's the party island to the west, and then the middle island is the environmental island.
Also, they say like the honeymoon island because there's not a lot happening there.
Yeah, and all three of those islands, no cars, which is why we went. So
Just bicycles and horses.
so
and walking.
tired of scooters and cars and stuff. So all right, so party island first, environment nature island second, and trash island third, which is our island. So finally, they took us to the trash island.
It's not the trash.
It totally was.
Well, they don't advertise it like this, but yes, we'll tell you what we
When
found.
we got there, there was trash everywhere. So we got there, and yeah, they dropped us off, and there was big piles of trash.
Yeah, actually, right when we got there, pretty much. I mean, we were greeted by a big pile of trash. It's true.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, a lot of trash.
Various horses, and we took. Shamar was like, "Should we take a horse?" And I was like, "No, it's right down the
We
street."
didn't have to go too far, so
Yeah,
we
we
passed on the
we
horse.
passed on the horse. Found a hotel, which Shamar had already booked, and we dropped our stuff off there, and we stayed there for what, 4
I think
nights?
4 nights, yeah.
4 nights, and
It wasn't the worst. It was a cute little hotel.
okay, so I wanted to know what the Gili Islands were all about, so I looked it up, and apparently there were fishermen from South Sulawesi, which is an oddly shaped island to the north, one of the larger parts of Indonesia, but not as densely populated as Java and other islands. And they would use the Gili Islands as like a base, but these islands really weren't inhabited until the 1970s when the governor of Lombok, which is the big island to the east. Okay, so to the west there's Bali, to the east there's Lombok, which are similarly sized. Bali is Hindu and Lombok is Muslim. And these three little Gili Islands are just off the coast of Lombok. And in the 70s, the governor said, okay, let's build coconut plantations. And so they gave leases out to private companies. Didn't really work. They tried later with prisoners to harvest coconuts from the plantations on Gili, which is the trash island where we were staying. And it didn't really go anywhere. It could not turn a profit, but Gili had an aquifer. There was actually water there. So the prisoners, some of them stuck around after they completed their sentences. And so when we were there actually was like kind of an old village from the 1970s there. And there were big signs that said, no bikini in the village, please.
Yeah, and like don't be topless.
And don't be topless. And one of the first things we noticed was there's a mosque on the island that issues the call to prayer 5 times a day. And right before the call to prayer, there's like a half hour of, I don't know if it was Muslim radio or just like a pre-recorded lecture that's unique to that mosque, but it would go and it would spout lectures for half an hour at a time, 5 times a day. And I thought it was kind of interesting because we were on the coast and the mosque was inland, so it sounded like this weird kind of sublime lecture in my ear, like a weird voice whispering how to be a little more mindful about how you live your life. But as we walked around the island later, it became a little more loud as you went inland. And it was, well, we'll get to that. But anyway, so after the 80s, backpackers started to discover the islands, and more people started to check out these islands that were populated by the descendants of prisoners and these old coconut plantation allotments. So these old coconut plantation allotments in the 70s were abandoned for a while, but eventually locals started to encroach on them when backpackers started checking out these islands. So the trash island that we were on, the local population remained there from the 70s, but the other 2 islands were never really populated until later because they didn't have their own aquifer. So Gili was the least populated, but Gili Trawangan now it's got the most people, but it's overwhelmingly tourist. Mm-hmm. And a minority of the population is locals, which moved in later. So we went to the trash island, which is the most authentically local Indonesian, whereas Meno, like hardly anyone lives there, and Trawangan, overwhelmingly Westerners trying to surf and look at turtles and stuff. So
yeah, I gotta say though, on Gili it was really interesting to be there as a tourist and with many other tourists, and obviously everybody's there to relax, go have dinner on the beach, have some beers, some wine, that kind of thing. And then yet throughout the day, multiple times a day, you're hearing the call to prayer. And then there's women, not very many, but there were some women, the local women walking around with their heads covered and their shoulders covered, very conservative.
Head to toe.
Head to toe.
But their face exposed.
Yeah, their face was exposed. But then you have some of the tourist women completely oblivious. And I would say this was not the majority, but it was some who were just basically walking through the streets in their thong bikini, like with their butt cheeks hanging out. And then you have the local woman completely covered from head to toe. So it was a very strange experience, I gotta say.
Giant contrast.
It was such a contrast. And there's kind of like this, it wasn't really a party vibe, but, like a vacation vibe. And then this kind of piety contrast.
I got the feeling that the young people who wore thong bikinis pretty quickly figured out that this isn't the island to do that.
It's not the party island.
Like they didn't get yelled at or anything, but they just kind of noticed that the vibe is not very party.
Yeah.
party hearty. And the people who seem to be hanging around the longest, if you overhear people talking about how I've been here for 10 years or whatever, they tend to be retirees, like late middle age sort of people,
Yeah, and we did
and
meet a
people without children.
yeah, we met a woman who actually met her husband at the hotel we were staying at, and she was a older woman, and she had ended up marrying a guy from the island, and then they ran their own little, like little hotel, so that was cool.
Yep.
But anyways, eventually we went to find the source of these call to prayer and like lectures that were being broadcast over the whole island. We're like, where the heck is that coming from? So we scouted it out and like wandered around all these back roads and through the center of the village and like even hidden parts of the village, and we eventually found the mosque.
Yeah. It's like a giant community center
And
that was made of stone and with minarets and the onion top motif.
but nobody was hanging out in it.
I didn't see anyone around it or going in it or in it.
No, however, there were people, local people who lived there. Their homes were right next to the mosque. I mean, just literally 6 feet away from the gate. And this loudspeaker was so loud, blasting these songs across the island. I mean, it was like being in a football field, like and hearing the speaker man speak over the loudspeaker. I mean, it was that loud. It was extremely loud, and I felt so bad for these people living right next to that.
By loud, I don't mean like you leave a TV on
No,
and it's
this is
yammering its commercials at you. I mean, like, it feels like it's doing ear damage to you to walk by it.
It was so loud, and people were living their lives right next to this thing, which is always broadcasting throughout the day. And early in the morning and late at night, I just couldn't imagine living next to it. And there were many complaints. I mean, obviously, from tourists who didn't know about this, and they ended up booking a hotel like very close to this area, and they just had horrible sleep.
Too bad.
But they probably should have done their homework.
Too bad. It's not where they're from.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah.
But it's-
Again, like where we were along the ocean, along the beach, I thought it was kind of cool to have this like murmuring, mystical voice.
Because we were farther away from it.
By the way, it was during Ramadan, and iftar. Certain places were closed for the evening meal during Ramadan. So
We didn't really notice it too much. I mean, they were
not
still,
really. That's the weird thing about it is like, you know, the women were like covered head to toe, and they were offering pork products in a lot of places and alcohol everywhere. That I didn't really see a whole lot of people taking breaks during prayer time. So not sure how that works, but
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway, we took a ferry to the party island after a while, and the party island. How did you feel when you arrived?
Surprisingly, I was kind of digging it. Yeah, like right away we got off the ferry. Okay, wait. Well, do we even want to go into that? We'll backtrack in a minute.
Drugs?
Yeah, right.
Come on. There were drugs on Gili.
I forgot to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, like when we were walking around, there were signs that would say like magic mushrooms with like Rastafarian motifs
And people would wander by and like under their breath be like, weed, this kind of thing.
yeah. But here, Jesus Christ, dude, you can't sit for 20 minutes without like two people being like
Mushrooms, ecstasy.
marijuana, mushrooms.
Yeah.
You heard ecstasy?
Yeah, the guy said ecstasy.
Okay, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. And the thing is, Indonesian laws for drugs are so extreme. So, like, I would never even want to take a chance with any of this. But apparently, on the islands, I mean, I guess there's no cops here. It seems very laid back and like nobody cares.
Super frontier. That's the beauty of this place. Is like there's like this isn't planned at all. There's no like corporate plan. It's kind of like a Wild West, which has good and bad aspects to it in the sense that there's too much development going on. Like they're overcapacity with the amount of like hotels that they've built, and the number of people that there are, and the amount of garbage generated, and like this and that, but like at the same time, there's kind of a sense that we're all in this together. I don't know how to describe it accurately, but there's a social fabric that's dense enough that people really kind of nod their head along like, yeah, we're all having fun and we're on vacation, including the little hustlers who are all over the place trying to sell drugs and
And sarongs and
and,
necklaces
and
and all
trinkets and
kinds
all
of
that
things.
shit.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe the absence of an authority figure to people who've never been around an environment where there is no authority figure, but it definitely shows.
Yeah. So when we first got here, right away, I noticed that it just seems like this island. It's probably because it gets more people. It just is kept up more. So there's a little bit less trash. The beaches do seem a little bit nicer. The sand a little bit whiter and less trashy. That kind of thing.
The people are nicer too.
Yeah, and
Like
they
Gili Air, people were kind of there's
there's a
like
strange
a
vibe there.
weird fucking like you're on a graveyard or
There's a
something.
weird vibe
There's a
there.
strange vibe of like sadness. Like it definitely feels like the island where prison labor was sent to like
Yeah.
work on coconut
Yeah, you
plantations.
can
Whereas
something
here
about
it's more like it's first generation and people are just kind of like, well, this we've made it. This is where we get big tips, and this is where you can have a blast and have fun. And people don't really think about time in the same way. Whereas the first island, Gili Air, that we were at, it felt like there's something a little scary
There's
and
something
sad
a little bit
about it.
sad about it. Yeah, definitely. But this one, I'm liking it, you know? Yeah, it's a nice place. Some of the views are just absolutely gorgeous, but they were in Gili Air too. So beautiful.
Yeah, one thing that people don't know about is that the Gili Islands, they on the east side of it is Mount Rinjani, which is the second biggest volcano in Indonesia. And anyone who knows much about Indonesia knows that it's along the Ring of Fire, and it's some of the most active volcanic hotspots in the world. And one of the places we went to in Bali right before we took the ferry over was Mount Agung, and that is the tallest mountain in Bali. So between Mount Agung and Mount Rinjani, there's two tall peaks, and it creates a weird microclimate, something about the way it moves wind or something. And so the Gili Islands are slightly drier than Bali and Lombok. And you can see it. There's a few more weird little cactusy plants, like dry, like barky sort of plants around here. And
Well, yeah, and the other thing is he said the Ring of Fire and these big volcanoes, which actually it's kind of scary because so when we were on Gili Air, you see signs for evacuation routes for tsunamis. But I was reading online about how if a tsunami does come to this area, you're a sitting duck. There really is nowhere to go because the land is pretty flat. So there's really not high elevation. Yeah, so that's a little concerning. I don't try not to think about it too much, but I get freaked out by that kind of stuff. So I actually do think about tsunamis quite often.
yeah, I know. But one thing you've also been thinking about is extreme weather events in general, because it's been rolling lightning and thunder
Yeah,
for several days,
yeah, well, today
all at
is
the same time, like right before sunset.
yeah, and especially today, it was beautiful sitting out on the beach and in the distance we could see the lightning coming down. And
Gorgeous.
it was still out far across the ocean,
But
but
it was as
so
the
beautiful to
tides were
watch.
coming in,
Yeah.
the lightning got more and more intense.
It did. It got more and more intense.
Amazing. Yeah. I wish I had something more dramatic to say, like the locals are mean or the tourists are evil and indulgent. But honestly,
Pretty chill
people are pretty goddamn chill. Like the tourists, I'm sure there are some drug users, but I haven't seen it.
Well,
And
and
people really
also
just kind of like to hold hands with their boyfriends and girlfriends, and people like
bicycle around.
bicycle around and take pictures of themselves on the beach, and
Yeah,
like
hang out at the
no
beach
one really
clubs.
gets too loud or obnoxious. It's strange.
Also, though, we are on the quiet side of the island, so the real party side of the island is the other side. So we haven't been there yet, and at night, so who knows what the heck happens over there.
True.
But so far, it's everything on this side seems pretty chill.
The most annoying thing is that there are like these single dudes who have their own ponies, and they'll just hang out on the beach and kind of trot by. You've got a perfect view of a sunset or clouds passing by, and you'll see, and a guy will get in your photo and just trot, trot, trot. And I think of horses and pooping onto sand, which is not what I like to think about when I'm on the beach. And there'll be like a series of 5 horses in a row, and what do you think about that? Do you want to
They
take a horse?
No, I don't want to take one of those horses. I, I mean, they're all right, but I feel kind of bad for them. I like wonder if they get hot out there, running through all that sand all day.
Maybe. The best thing about Gili Trawangan so far is that the beaches seem like more at a gradual slant than they were at Gili Air. Like at Gili Air, there seemed like there was a big drop off.
Beaches are nicer here.
Yeah, there's
Beaches.
a big beach drop off. I think because the coral reefs have been damaged so much. I mean, around all the islands, but especially Gili Air, the trash island. And I remember the first night when we went out to the beach to go swimming. There was a guy on a boat, maybe 2 people, and I saw like a flash beneath the boat, and I was joking like, "Oh, he probably dropped some dynamite to blow up a chunk of coral and gather a bunch of fish without having to work hard to get fish." And then I read the next day, like, no, they actually do that all the time. Dynamite fishing is a big thing, and it's such a big thing that because the corals they're so damaged that when the waves come or any kind of storm, that it washes away all of the sand, and it creates like a steep beach which just erodes the entire island. And yeah, so that sucks. But and apparently here on Gili Trawangan, the diver companies have created a non-profit, what's it called, Gili Eco Trust. Yeah, and they have been doing they've been regenerating corals using a technology called biorock, where they run electric current through steel rods, and it creates a calcification around it, and you can build reefs artificially that way. And as you build more calcium on these reefs, little chunks of it will break off and create more and more sand over time. But you can accelerate the development of reefs on these artificial sites, and the reefs are
What?
the reefs create habitat for the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, just exactly. Just side note, it's like, I don't know, 11:30 at night, and I've been out in the sun all day.
come on,
And I'm
man.
kind of tired, so I lost track what we talking about. Okay, coral reefs.
All right, the tourism, it's not just the tourism that's ruining the coral reefs here. It's also the fishermen who've been moving out and like blowing the fuck out of the reefs with dynamite and net fishing and anchor fishing and stuff. So to offset the cost of tourism, some of the diver companies have been teaming up with local forces, local organizations and businesses to create a nonprofit called the Gili Eco Trust, where they try to regenerate some of the reefs using this biorock technology. And if you regenerate the coral reefs, you can create more habitat for fish, and that can create more habitat for sea turtles, and it can also help prevent erosion of the beaches. And not just prevent erosion of the beaches, but also contribute to the replenishment of the sand of the beaches, and help keep the islands intact and help the marine ecosystem here. So I thought it would be nice to find the people who are running this thing, but we've only been here a couple days on the party island. So we've been to the trash island, we're on the party island, and maybe we'll take a day trip to the nature island. But since there's more people on the party island, including the diver people who are trying to regenerate the place, hopefully we can use our time here to reach out to conscientious people. And got anything else to say before we wrap this up?
I'm trying to think. I think that might be it. It's so much has happened since we made the last what is this? A podcast? I don't even know what these are.
It's a recording.
Recording. We'll just call it the last recording. Yeah. So I think I think that's good.
The tourists have been pretty well behaved, I gotta say. I thought it would be nothing but an exaggeration of spring break morons, dude. I thought it'd be just a bunch of douchebags being like, rock and roll, man, and just like urinating in public, that kind of thing. But really, no. I've seen a lot of locals selling drugs. I haven't seen any Westerners buy drugs. I've seen locals use dynamite fishing that one time, and I've seen Westerners walk around in thongs, kind of stupidly not paying attention to local customs. But I've also seen locals like burn trash and that type of shit. And I don't know. To be honest, I come here expecting the worst, and people are just people. You know, like there's nothing really. There's nothing egregious going on.
No, as far as we can tell. I mean, I'm sure stuff happens, but overall, it's pretty pleasant.
I would assume that more people would be trying to fuck over the tourists. But honestly, as much as there's almost certainly like a cartel arrangement for high prices,
really nice.
People are pretty nice, dude. I don't know. I've been all kinds of places where everyone kind of growls at tourists and tries to shout at them until they give them more money, but not here. I don't know why. Yeah. It's the absence of authority. No one wants to stop the party. But so we're in a kind of anarcho-capitalist, weird little anti-authoritarian bubble, or anti-bubble. And with that in mind, it has been April 2nd, Sunday, 2023, here in Gili Trawangan, Indonesia, off the coast of Lombok. And this has been a wonderful time.
Yeah.
And Shamar has some final thing to say.
Well, I'll see what I say. See, I'm getting sleepy. We'll see you next time. Until then.
Bye.
Bye.